What is the solution to solving our unemployment crisis? Is it growth, or is it a combination of growth plus an enabling policy environment? This is Zakhele from the Free Market Foundation, and today we'll be talking about what we consider to be the most optimum solution to solving the unemployment crisis that is facing South Africans. So as we all know, last week, the quarterly labor force survey released, and we saw in all the usual horror that we should be quite accustomed to now, that a large percentage of South Africans are still unemployed. And this is a problem. Some among us in society in South Africa think that the solution, well, the only solution to the unemployment problem would be to grow our economy. Although we do agree that the economy does need to grow, we don't think that growth in and of itself will be able to solve our unemployment crisis. Instead, we want to create an enabling policy environment that will facilitate even much more better and substantive growth, a policy environment that will enable South Africans to be employed. And our solution to this is the Job Seekers Exemption certificate. We want to primarily focus on the South African labor regime because that is where the problem lies. In South Africa, it is hard to hire and fire people. And I know some will say that the reason for this is because those greedy capitalists will exploit human beings. But the primary reason why the free market and commerce works is because people voluntarily enter into contracts and agreements. So by having regulations that inhibit those contracts and agreements and put terms and conditions that would otherwise not be there, had those regulations not existed, it means that it creates an extra cost when it comes to hiring someone. Just think, when you want to hire someone to do something for you, do you want to consider what Pretoria has said is the minimum condition to employ that person, or do you want to come into an agreement with that person by yourself? By having these conditions that are imposed by Pretoria and our legislatures in Cape Town, we then run into a situation whereby it becomes much more expensive to hire someone, because now you have terms that you would otherwise not have contracted to had the politicians not instituted those regulations. And the results are clear for everyone to see, right? And I would like to contrast this particularly with China, because a lot of our, politicians are huge fans of China. In China, they understood this quite acutely. In my most recent article, I mentioned how in China, they don't have collective bargaining agreements. The right to strike is prohibited, and they have quite the dynamic labor environment. And the results are that China's unemployment, with all the billions of people that they do have, is significantly lower than South Africa's unemployment. Their youth unemployment, which is considered a crisis, is at 14%, and ours is close to 50%. And that is primarily because the right to choose, with all its horrid consequences at times, is allowed to be practiced in China, and the economy is reaping their benefits. And that is the primary reason behind the Job Seekers Exemption certificate. We want South Africans who want to be exempt from the regulations that currently exist to choose to be exempt from them, to choose to not be subject to the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Minimum Wage Act, or some provisions of the Labor Relations Act. And we find this primary necessity of choice to be the fundamental right of every human being. So this comes from a principled position outside of the consequences that this choice will create for, our economy and in solving our unemployment crisis. So as part of the solution to solving unemployment, we think that the best way to facilitate growth would be to allow South Africans to choose to contract with their prospective employers on their own terms, not on terms imposed by politicians and their regulations. Now, as always, of course, we'd like to hear your thoughts about our proposed solution to unemployment. So please do let us know in the comments, and always remember to stay free.